I never liked that blue dress. Not because it was too revealing or anything like that. It was because she only wore it when she needed something: leverage, attention, control. It was her "I'm about to get what I want" dress. So when Brenna stepped out of our bedroom that evening wearing it, claiming she was heading to a quick sit-down with her boss about a potential leadership track, my stomach coiled like a fist. She didn't kiss me goodbye, just grabbed her clutch, muttered something about traffic on Route 7, and shut the door like she was late to change the world. The second I heard the car pull away from the driveway, I got up from the couch, walked into the study, and opened my laptop. The camera feed was already live. It had been for 30 minutes. Because what she couldn't know, was that I had placed a motion-triggered camera inside the ceramic air purifier she insisted we needed in the living room. The one she said matched our earth tone energy. I hollowed it out myself, fit the lens behind one of the fake vents, ran it through a dummy cable, and synced it to my cloud storage. It wasn't paranoia. It was quiet survival. I hadn't watched the footage for weeks. I had hoped I was wrong about the texts she hid, the Friday meetings that ran a little late, the new perfume she swore she wasn't wearing. But that day, something snapped. Maybe it was the way she didn't look back. Maybe it was the way the dress moved like it had a destination. I don't know. But I clicked. The footage from earlier that day started off normal. She came home around 4:15 p.m., took off her heels, and poured herself a glass of wine. Not unusual. But then she sat on the couch, phone in hand, and waited. Her knee bounced. She kept checking the window. At 4:52, she got up and checked her teeth in the mirror. At 5:01, she adjusted the straps of that dress. And at 5:08, someone knocked on the door. I paused the video. I stared at the screen. It wasn't her boss. It wasn't even someone from work. It was the man I'd only seen once, maybe twice, passing by in a silver car with out-of-state plates. I thought he was a neighbor's cousin or something. But she let him in like they knew each other well. Too well. She didn't act startled. She didn't ask why he was there. She kissed him. The kind of kiss that you don't give your boss unless your promotion includes a mattress. I hit mute, even though I didn't need to. I already knew what kind of conversation followed. Her gestures were animated. She laughed. No, she giggled. He took off his jacket. She slipped out of her heels. They moved to the couch, to the very center of the frame. I leaned back, not breathing. I watched the woman I made soup for last night, who I massaged during her migraines, who I held when she thought she might lose her job. I watched her curl up against another man like he was her home. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just watched. Because that's all I've been doing for the past year, hasn't it? Watching her drift. Watching her smile at other people. Watching myself disappear. And here's the worst part. At the end of the video, right before they stood up to leave together, she grabbed her phone and sent me a message. Stuck in traffic. Be home around 9. Love you. I didn't even blink when it arrived. I just stared at the screen and whispered something I didn't even know I was thinking. She's done this before. Because the camera wasn't showing me a mistake. It was showing me a routine. And I was just now arriving at the part where I was no longer needed. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, while she curled up next to me like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent the evening tangled up with someone else, feeding me lies over text while lying to herself about what it meant. Her breathing was slow, steady, innocent. It was infuriating. Because the person I loved most had become a stranger right beside me, and she didn't even notice I hadn't touched her all night. I kept waiting for a flicker of guilt, a sign of discomfort. But nothing. She slept like a rock, like her conscience had already signed the non-disclosure agreement. By morning, I had watched the footage 3 more times. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe I was trying to find a moment where she hesitated, something that showed me it wasn't real. Maybe I hoped she'd suddenly back away and push him out the door. But she didn't. She smiled through the whole thing. She led. She guided. She enjoyed it. And that did something to me. It broke a piece of whatever fragile hope I was still clinging to. She came downstairs around 9:30 a.m., hair still messy from sleep, wearing one of my old shirts like it meant something. She yawned, kissed my head, and asked if I wanted pancakes. I looked up at her. I don't know what I expected. A flash of shame? A sudden confession? She just smiled, completely unaware that I had been up all night watching the replay of our marriage collapsing in high definition. I said no to the pancakes. Said I wasn't feeling well. She shrugged and started humming to herself while she made breakfast. Humming. like we were in some Sunday morning sitcom. My knuckles went white around the mug I was gripping, but I didn't say a word. I didn't know how. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. Instead, I went to the garage, pretending to check the water heater. I stood in the dark for 10 minutes, gripping the cold metal shelves, just breathing. I needed a plan. I couldn't unsee what I saw. I couldn't unknow what I knew. But if I exploded now, if I confronted her without thinking, I knew she'd twist it. She was too clever for that. Too practiced. She's the kind of person who makes people question their memory of events, not hers. So I decided to wait. But waiting didn't mean doing nothing. That day, I made copies of the footage and uploaded them to a secure cloud account under a different name. I encrypted everything. I bought a burner phone and transferred the files there too. If she wanted to gaslight me when the time came, she'd be fighting against hard evidence and multiple backups. Over the next few days, I started noticing everything. How she came home slightly later than usual every Tuesday. How her phone was suddenly face down every time we had dinner. How she'd laugh at a message and then pretend it was just a meme from Mandy. But she didn't show me the memes anymore. She didn't show me anything. On Thursday, she came home with wine. Said she wanted to celebrate. I asked what for. She smiled wide and said, "Stuart officially submitted my name for the promotion. Can you believe it?" I almost choked on my drink. I looked at her and nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said, voice dry, "I can believe it." She didn't catch it. She poured herself a glass and put on music. We danced. She even tried to be affectionate again, touched my arm like she used to, kissed me like she hadn't in months. But it felt fake, forced, like she was trying to maintain the illusion just enough to keep me dull and stupid. But I wasn't dull anymore. I was watching. That night, I checked the camera again, even though she hadn't brought anyone home. I was just wired, paranoid. But then, just before midnight, something caught my eye. A notification popped up on her phone while she was asleep, a message from a contact named Caleb. I memorized the number. I waited until her breathing deepened, then got out of bed, walked into the kitchen, and opened the laptop. I ran a reverse search on the number. It wasn't Caleb. It was Stuart, her boss, the same man who kissed her on my couch. I sat there staring at the result, something twisting in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake her up and throw the laptop at her. But I didn't. I closed it. I stood there for another minute, then walked quietly to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold floor. I finally cried. Not because she cheated, but because I knew this wasn't some fling. This was a plan, and I was the last one to know it was already in motion. The next morning, I pretended to be asleep while she got dressed. She moved around the room with calculated quietness, like she didn't want to wake the person she was lying to. She picked out her earrings carefully, straightened her skirt, reapplied her lipstick in the mirror, and looked at herself with a grin I hadn't seen in months. That subtle, victorious grin that made her eyes flicker like she'd just won something. She left a note on the counter about needing to head into the office early for a quarterly review, but she took her curling iron with her. I don't know why that specific detail stuck out, but it did. After she left, I sat up and stared at the empty space beside me. It still smelled like her. That soft vanilla and citrus scent I used to love. Now it made my stomach turn. I went to the kitchen, stared at the note she left, and then crumpled it into a tight ball without reading past the second line. I should have gone to work, but instead I sat in the living room, pulled up the camera feed again, and started reviewing footage from the last 2 weeks. Frame by frame. Timestamps. Door clicks. Rewinding and slowing down the video like it was evidence from a crime scene. Because in a way, it was. It wasn't just Stuart. That's what destroyed me. One night, 4 days earlier, she came home late after supposedly having drinks with the team. I remembered that night because I had left a dinner plate in the oven for her. She hadn't touched it. She told me she was exhausted and went straight to bed. But the footage showed her stumbling into the house, giggling with someone else, someone younger. Blonde, tall, different build from Stuart. They kissed in the hallway like high schoolers, and she dragged him to the couch, giggling like I hadn't seen her giggle in years. He didn't stay long. 20 minutes, maybe. She walked him out, came back inside, wiped her mouth with her sleeve, and took a selfie by the fireplace. Then she opened the fridge, pulled out the untouched dinner plate, and tossed it straight into the trash. I remember the exact plate. I had made lemon rosemary chicken, her favorite. She didn't even bother lying to me about that night. She just said she was beat and kissed my forehead. There's something profoundly shattering about realizing your home isn't really yours anymore. That it's just a prop in someone else's act. That the furniture, the walls, the framed wedding photos, they're all background noise for someone else's script. And you're not even an extra in it. You're the guy asleep in the other room, unaware the real show started without you. That evening, she came home glowing. Literally glowing. Hair curled, cheeks flushed, eyes sparkling. She tossed her bag on the kitchen stool and wrapped her arms around me from behind while I was stirring sauce on the stove. I flinched without meaning to. She noticed. Rough day? She asked, her chin resting on my shoulder like it used to when we first moved in together. I nodded. Yeah, just tired. She hummed softly and kissed my cheek. I got good news. Stuart wants me to help lead the regional pitch next month. He said I've got the kind of energy that inspires people. I gripped the spoon tighter. I'm sure he did. She didn't even hear the edge in my voice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She walked off into the hallway, humming that same upbeat tune she always played when she was excited, the one I used to dance to with her on our kitchen floor. That night, I didn't sleep again. I lay in bed staring at the faint reflection of the ceiling fan blade spinning above me. Her breathing next to me was soft, deep, content. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her awake and ask her who she was. But I knew the answer. The woman beside me wasn't the girl I met outside that bookstore 8 years ago. She wasn't the one who cried during Pixar movies or made up weird nicknames for the neighbor's dog. She wasn't even the woman I married. She was someone else entirely now, and I had no idea how long she'd been gone. But the most terrifying part? She looked happier without me. Saturday was the day it all truly collapsed. And not because of some big explosion or confrontation. Not because of yelling or plates breaking or a dramatic confession. It was the silence. The kind of silence that tells you, without words, that everything you believed in was quietly dismantled behind your back while you were busy making coffee and asking if she needed anything from the store. That morning, I woke up before her. I sat at the edge of the bed for a while, just listening to her breathing, thinking about how many lies could live inside one peaceful exhale. Then I walked downstairs, opened my laptop, and started going through the footage again. At that point, it had become a habit. Not a healthy one, but something between self-preservation and self-destruction. I was expecting to find more of what I already knew, sneaky kisses, whispered conversations, careful exits. But instead, I found something worse. The previous Thursday, while I had gone out to run errands, buying groceries, getting the car's oil changed, picking up a new charger for her phone that she claimed had stopped working, she had someone else over. Not Stuart. Not the blonde guy. Someone new. I only recognized him because I had seen his photo once in a group shot from her office's holiday dinner. His name was Darren. He was married, had 2 daughters. I remembered that because she had told me once that he always left early from parties to get home to the girls. He didn't leave early that afternoon. They barely even spoke when he arrived. She let him in, and he immediately kissed her like it was a scheduled event. They moved like it wasn't the first time, like it was routine. Comfortable. There was no awkwardness. Just familiarity. She didn't even bother pretending. She wore the same robe she usually wore on lazy Sundays with me. That robe used to mean something. I stared at the footage, jaw tight, hands trembling. This wasn't a one-time lapse. This wasn't even about feelings anymore. This was a pattern, a system, a structure that she had built behind my back with precision. Different men, different times. Each encounter happening when she knew I'd be gone, when I was doing things for her, running around like a loyal fool while she hosted her secret life in the very living room where we used to put up Christmas decorations together. That day, something in me shifted. It wasn't rage. I didn't flip the table. I didn't scream. It was worse than rage, it was stillness. That kind of hollow numbness that comes after the final blow, when there's nothing left to fight for because you already lost everything you didn't realize was being taken. I closed the laptop. I sat there staring at the window, watching the wind barely move the tree branches. And then I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I picked up my old journal. I used to write in it all the time before we got married. Thoughts, doubts, stories, pages filled with things I was too afraid to say out loud. But I stopped writing somewhere along the way. I think I stopped around the time I started trying too hard to be enough for her. I wrote just one sentence. Today I buried the idea of her, so I could mourn the lie I loved. I stared at that line for what felt like an hour. Then I closed the journal, hid it behind the bookshelf where I knew she'd never look, and got to work. I didn't want revenge. That wasn't it. But I needed clarity. I needed proof, not just for me, but for whatever came next. So I installed an additional camera, this one in the hallway by the front door, disguised as a broken smoke detector. I synced all the feeds to a secure cloud drive and labeled the files by date and name. I created folders. I tagged faces. I cataloged lies. That night, she came home with Chinese food. My favorite. No occasion. She said she was feeling grateful for everything lately and wanted to do something nice. I asked her why. She shrugged and said, just because. Then she kissed me on the forehead and poured wine into the fancy glasses we hadn't used in 2 years. We watched a movie together, one of our old favorites. She curled up next to me like nothing was wrong, like there wasn't a separate Brenna who existed on camera while the one beside me just kept the peace. She didn't even flinch when I turned off the lights that night. She kissed me softly, whispered, "I love you," and rolled over. I laid there wide awake, watching the ceiling fan spin. And in that moment, I realized something that chilled me deeper than any betrayal. She didn't feel guilty, because in her mind, I was never supposed to find out. The next few days unfolded like a perfectly rehearsed play, and I, apparently, had always been cast as the fool. Brenna was radiant, lighter, somehow. She cooked breakfast twice. She hummed in the shower. She even started calling me pet names again, names she hadn't used since the 3rd year of our marriage. To anyone on the outside, we looked like a couple reigniting their spark. But behind that paper-thin curtain of domestic bliss, I was documenting every single move she made. I had stopped questioning whether I was being obsessive. I knew I was. But I also knew that I was right. I had proof, not suspicions, not rumors, not assumptions. I had time-stamped footage of her walking hand-in-hand with a man who called her baby on my couch in my house while I was picking up prescriptions she said she needed. And she knew I'd never question her. She'd spent years learning the exact tone to use when she lied, soft, dismissive, a little amused, like of course I'm not hiding anything. Why would I need to? But I had stopped being the man who didn't question. On Tuesday, something strange happened. I came home early from work, unannounced. I'd left a bit of code running on a server and figured I'd work the rest of the day remotely. When I opened the front door, I heard something crash in the kitchen, not loudly, but sharp enough that it wasn't an accident. I froze. When I stepped in, I saw her standing at the sink, clearly startled. She was holding her phone in one hand, a broken glass on the floor at her feet. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in," she said quickly. Too quickly. I dropped the glass. Scared myself. I stared at her. "Everything okay?" She nodded, but her eyes kept darting to her phone. "Yeah, just a clumsy moment." I didn't believe her. I didn't even bother pretending to. I just stepped over the broken glass, picked up the dustpan, and began sweeping. She stood there awkwardly, then said she had a call to take and disappeared into the bedroom. I didn't ask who the call was with. I already knew. An hour later, I checked the feed. She hadn't deleted anything from her phone. She wasn't that cautious. But the feed from the hallway camera confirmed what I suspected. Just seconds before I walked in, she had been video chatting with Stuart. He was shirtless. She had been laughing. And the moment she heard my keys in the door, she dropped the phone and hurled the glass at the counter, scrambling to make it look like an accident. That's what the crash was. Not clumsiness. Panic. I replayed the moment 10 times. The way her smile vanished. The sheer terror in her eyes when she thought I might have seen something. And something inside me twisted with a kind of bitter satisfaction. She was afraid. Not of me. I wasn't the type to yell or throw things or demand answers. No, she was afraid of losing the cover. Afraid I might finally ask the one question I'd avoided all this time. Why? But I didn't ask it. Instead, I printed the frame from the video, the one where Stuart's half-naked reflection could be seen in the screen of her phone, and she was smiling at him like he was her entire world, and I folded it neatly into an envelope. Then I waited. 2 days later, she told me she'd be attending a company dinner the following Friday night, just the core leadership team. She said it with this casual tone, sipping from her mug like she wasn't feeding me a line that had already rotted from overuse. She even invited me to drop her off, but no need to wait. It'll run late, and I might Uber home. That was new. She never invited me anywhere near these events before. Which meant only one thing: she was getting bold. Or reckless. I smiled and told her I'd drop her off, absolutely. She kissed my cheek and thanked me, eyes shining with the same fake warmth I'd seen in every video. I nodded, told her she looked amazing, and walked upstairs, where I opened the envelope again just to look at the photo one more time. It wasn't that I needed reminding. It was that I needed to feel the clarity again. The certainty. Because every time I saw her smile and act like the perfect wife, I started to question what I knew. I started to wonder if I was exaggerating, if somehow this whole thing was less deliberate than it seemed. But it wasn't. She was playing two roles, the doting wife and the secret lover, and she'd gotten so good at it, I nearly started to believe her again. That Friday came faster than I expected. She wore the blue dress. Of course she did. Hair pinned up. Makeup perfect. She looked stunning, and I hated that it still hurt to see her like that. I drove her downtown, dropped her off outside the hotel's private lounge, and watched her blow me a kiss through the car window. Then she turned and walked into the building like a queen entering her kingdom. But what she didn't know, what she could never have guessed, was that I had already booked a room in the same building, days in advance. And not just any room, one with a perfect view of the lounge entrance and a mirrored wall that gave me a clean reflection of the interior space when viewed at the right angle. I sat there in that room for hours, watching, waiting, and at 8:17 p.m., I saw her walk across the lounge floor straight into Stuart's arms. They kissed. Not just a quick kiss on the cheek. Not a professional greeting. A full, slow, intimate kiss. In public. Like they had nothing to hide. I took a photo. And then another. And another. Because if she wanted to pretend our life was still intact, I'd make sure reality would shatter every single lie she clung to. The room I booked had this long, narrow mirror across from the bed. If I angled the blinds just right and stood in the shadowed corner, I could see almost everything in the lounge below without being noticed. It was strange, standing there in silence, watching my wife smile, laugh, flirt, like I was spying on a movie I never agreed to be part of. At one point, she rested her hand on Stuart's chest and leaned into him as if he were her anchor in a sea of chaos. That gesture used to be mine. That comfort. That unspoken language of closeness. And now it was being spoken fluently with someone who looked at her like he'd already rewritten the story of her life. I took photos slowly, deliberately. I didn't want to miss anything. I wasn't planning revenge, no messy confrontation or shouting match. I just wanted truth. Real, undeniable truth. Truth she couldn't blink away, couldn't dodge or deflect with soft words or twisted logic. I stayed in that room until midnight, watching them sip wine, whisper across the table, touch legs under it. And when they finally left the lounge together, walking hand in hand out the side exit toward the hotel elevators, I felt like something inside me detached completely. Like I was no longer her husband, but just an observer of her new life. She came home at 1:42 a.m. I heard the front door creak open from my study. I didn't move. She tiptoed up the stairs, paused outside our bedroom like she was making sure I was asleep, and then slipped inside. I listened to the soft sounds of her getting undressed, of the closet door gently shutting, of her climbing into bed as if everything was perfectly normal. The next morning, I didn't mention anything. I made coffee. She walked in wearing my old hoodie, pretending to yawn and stretch like she was exhausted from networking all night. I asked her if it went well. She smiled and said, "Yeah, Stuart thinks I've got a real shot at the regional director role. He said I've been standing out lately." I stirred my coffee slowly. "You've definitely stood out," I said, my voice calm but so loaded it hung in the air like static. She didn't catch it. Or maybe she did and chose to pretend she didn't. Over the next week, I acted like nothing had changed. I cooked. I cleaned. I made small talk about weather and groceries and new shows on Netflix. But beneath all of it, I was planning. I had gathered everything, over a dozen video clips, timestamps, call logs, message screenshots I'd captured when she carelessly left her phone unlocked beside me on the couch. I created a digital folder with a password so obscure, even I had to write it down. And then I burned it all onto a USB drive, labeled it with a single word, Brenna. The real twist didn't come from her. It came from someone else. 3 days before I planned to confront her, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another call, same number. I picked up. "Is this Eldon?" A woman's voice asked. "Yeah." "Who is this?" "This is Rachel, Stuart's wife." I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't even known Stuart was married. He never wore a ring in the photos. Brenna never mentioned it. He was always just Stuart, the boss, not Stuart the family man. I stayed silent for a beat. "I found your number in one of the message backups on our shared cloud account," Rachel continued. I think we should talk." I agreed to meet her the next day. Neutral ground, a park near the city library. She showed up with a stack of printed messages, a tired face, and the kind of calm rage that only comes from betrayal buried under weeks of disbelief. We talked for over an hour. She had known for almost a month. She'd been gathering her own evidence. She hadn't told Stuart yet, not directly. She wanted to see how far it would go. We compared notes. My videos matched her timestamps. Her screenshots matched the calls I had traced. Together, we painted a clear picture of two people who had thrown their vows into the fireplace and danced in the ashes. That night, after I got home, I found Brenna in the kitchen looking through a new recipe book, acting like everything was normal. I sat at the table and just watched her. For the first time in weeks, I looked at her without anger. Just clarity. She looked up and smiled. Thinking spaghetti tonight? I nodded. Yeah. Why not? Because it would be the last dinner we ever had in that house. She didn't know it yet, but the clock had already started ticking. The next 48 hours were a blur of precision. My hands trembled, but my mind was razor-sharp. The truth had become too loud to ignore, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was the one writing the story, not just reading the chapters she left unfinished. I had my proof. I had Rachel's confirmation. I had a plan, and all that was left was to follow through. I didn't want drama. I didn't want shouting or tears or gasps. I wanted silence. I wanted her to sit with the weight of what she had done without the option to escape into performance. She was good at that, turning every confrontation into a misunderstanding, every lie into it, "You're being sensitive." Not this time. I wasn't going to give her space to manipulate the air around her. I was going to take the air away altogether. On Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than her. I made coffee, like I always did, and set the table like everything was normal. I even added the little folded napkins she used to love before she stopped noticing them. When she came downstairs in her robe, I still puffy from sleep, I handed her a cup and told her I needed to show her something. She blinked, confused, and followed me to the study. The USB drive was already plugged in. The file was labeled with her name. Just that. No drama, no accusations. I clicked it open, stepped aside, and let the footage play. At first, she said nothing. The first video was short, a clip of her and Stuart in the living room. The kiss from 2 weeks ago, slow and unmistakable. She didn't flinch. Her mouth opened like she was about to speak, but I raised my hand, not to stop her in anger, but to let her know I wouldn't entertain lies this time. The next clip was the blonde man. She shifted in her seat. Her eyes flicked toward me. I didn't move. Then Darren. And the audio, faint but clear, of her telling him she couldn't believe she ever married someone so passive. That one made her close her eyes. Her jaw tightened. She started breathing faster. Then, the final file, a photo. The one I took from the hotel lounge. Her lips pressed against Stuart's, her hands clutched behind his neck. Public. Unapologetic. I said nothing. For almost a full minute, neither of us made a sound. Then she finally whispered, "So you've been spying on me." I almost laughed. That was her first response. You did something wrong. The irony cut like a blade. No, I said calmly. I gave you the freedom to be honest. You just used it to build a second life inside mine. Her face went cold. You had no right. I had every right, I said, cutting her off not with volume, but with clarity. Every right to know who I've been sleeping beside. Every right to know why our marriage has felt like slow suffocation for the last year. She looked like she might cry, but it wasn't guilt in her eyes. It was fear. Fear that the mask had finally cracked, and there was no one left to fool but herself. Eldon, she started, but I shook my head. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to end it. Her breath caught. You're leaving? No, I said, steady. You are. I walked into the hallway and returned with a small suitcase, her overnight bag. It wasn't much. I hadn't packed out of spite. Just the essentials. I handed it to her and nodded toward the door. You can go wherever you want, I said. You already spend most of your time with everyone but me. She stared at the bag, then back at me, like she couldn't process what was happening. This is insane. You can't just kick me out. This is our home. No, I corrected her quietly. It was our home, but you've turned it into a hotel. And your checkout time was last night. She stormed upstairs, yelling something about lawyers, about how I'd regret this. I didn't follow her. I just sat in the chair and watched the window, like I had done so many nights before. A few minutes later, she came back down, face red, eyes wild, the overnight bag still in her hand. This isn't over, she hissed. I didn't flinch. It's been over. You just never told me. She left without another word. I didn't move for nearly an hour. And when I finally did, I didn't cry. I breathed. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I felt air in my lungs that wasn't filtered through doubt. I was alone, but I wasn't broken. Not anymore. The silence after the door shut behind her wasn't heavy the way I thought it would be. It was still, clean. It wasn't the silence of loss. It was the kind of silence that follows the last page of a book you should have stopped reading long ago. I sat in it, unmoving, letting the weight of everything float off my shoulders piece by piece. The lies, the gaslighting, the humiliating moments when I doubted my own instincts. They didn't belong here anymore. I expected sadness, but what I felt, surprisingly, was clarity. That night, I didn't pour a drink. I didn't call anyone. I didn't sink into self-pity. I opened the windows, changed the bedsheets, and threw away the fancy robe she used to wear whenever she was playing a part. I took down the framed photo of our wedding from the living room and replaced it with an old landscape painting I used to love before she made me put it in the attic. Then I went to the guest room, a place I'd avoided for months, and slept for 10 hours straight without waking once. The following morning, I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I took a walk. No destination, no earbuds, no distractions, just the streets of my neighborhood, the trees, the early sun slicing through the mist, the smell of someone's sprinkler turning on nearby. Everything felt real again, not warped by suspicion, not clouded by that sick feeling in my stomach that I'd grown used to. I noticed the cracks in the sidewalks, the mailboxes I used to pass without thinking. I realized I had forgotten what it was like to just exist without carrying the weight of someone else's deception. A week passed, then another. I heard from Rachel again, Stuart's wife. She told me she'd filed. She sounded calm, collected, almost relieved. We didn't talk long, but before she hung up, she said, "I think we both got lucky in the end. It hurts now, but we're out of something that was slowly killing us. That's not a tragedy, that's survival." She was right. I started writing again. Not in secret this time. Not sad ramblings in a hidden journal. Actual writing, short stories, journal entries, little pieces of thoughts that turned into something bigger. I forgot how good it felt to let things out without fear of judgment. And the house. It felt different. Not emptier, lighter. I moved the furniture around. Painted the study a color she never liked, but I always did. I adopted a dog. A lazy hound named Oliver who follows me around like I'm the most interesting person he's ever met. That kind of unconditional loyalty. I didn't know how much I missed it until I had it again. One evening, about a month later, I found myself laughing at a movie. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh. One that caught me off guard, sharp and genuine. And I realized I hadn't done that, really laughed, in nearly a year. I don't know what comes next. I'm not rushing to figure it out. There's no next relationship on the horizon, no grand comeback. Just me, waking up each morning, no longer questioning if I'm enough. No longer shrinking myself to be tolerated. I was never the weak one. I was the one who stayed loyal in silence. The one who loved honestly, even when it wasn't returned. And now? Now I love something else even more. Peace. She thought she could rewrite our story behind my back. But I'm the one holding the pen now. And I'm finally starting a chapter that's mine.